The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. Confirmation hearings begin today and will continue for some time. Talk a little bit about that in the first hour, as well as what we can expect from the new Trump administration when the inauguration takes place on January 20th. Today, of course, they started off with Senator Jeff Sessions and asked questions about DACA. Also, there was an opportunity that Lindsey Graham gave to Senator Sessions to talk about how painful it had been to be cast as a racist, in part because he has a Southern name. Beauregard is his middle name, Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, and also being from Alabama. There were a number of protests. Guess we shouldn't have been surprised by that. Code Pink, as well as individuals dressed up as KKK members, saying a little bit later that he would protect LGBT people, would uphold Roe versus Wade, and would recuse himself from any investigation involving the Clintons. So a lot more we can talk about. As today we have, of course, the confirmation hearings for Senator Jeff Sessions and the Senate Judiciary. This afternoon, you will have the confirmation hearings for John Kelly in the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. Then tomorrow, Betsy DeVos, Education Secretary, Elaine Chao, Transportation Secretary, of course, one that also will be somewhat controversial and heated, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And then on Thursday, Ben Carson for Housing and Urban Development, Wilbur Ross for Commerce, and many more to follow. As we mentioned yesterday, we are privileged to have with us today Dr. Richard Land, an individual that has been with us many times before, currently president of Southern Evangelical Seminary, but before that, for 25 years as the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and even before that, served for many years, 8 years, as the vice president of Criswell College, a graduate of Princeton University, having a doctor of philosophy from Oxford University, as well as a master of theology degree from New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. Dr. Richard Land, always a delight to have you on the program.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you, Kerby. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Let me also mention that you are one of those individuals that has provided some counsel to Donald Trump. So a little bit later, I think we might get into that as well, because that is an insight that you have that most of us don't have. You've had a chance to meet with him and be in some phone calls, and so I'd love to hear about that. But the confirmation hearings proved to be a lot more controversial than they were, say, 8 years ago. In 2009, you had the Secretaries of Agriculture, Education, Energy, as well as HHS and Homeland Security and Interior and the VA, all actually confirmed by the Senate by the time that Barack Obama took the oath of office. 2 days later, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton confirmed 95-2. Also, the Transportation Secretary. I don't think it's going to look like that this time. What are your thoughts?
No, it's not. The Democrats are going to be playing political theater with this. And I think that there are two reasons for that. One is that, the Republicans tend to behave more responsibly when they lose than the Democrats do. That's not just my observation based on Obama's transition, but, when Clinton left, they took all the W's off the typewriters and off the keyboards in the old executive office building in the White House, and just silly stuff like that. I think the second thing is that Mr. Trump has been, should I say, pleasantly surprising, shockingly surprising.
I wanted to hear what you had to say about that. Yes, in terms of these nominees. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, some of my conservative friends and I, we've been pinching ourselves, Are we hallucinating, or is this actually happening? This is the kind these are the kind of people that would have been picked by Mike Pence. And, of course, Mike Pence is the head of the transition team. And I know a good number of the people on the transition team, and I can tell you right now, about half of them, Kerby, think I'm liberal. I mean, these are very conservative people. And, I've been solicited 5 times now for personnel recommendations,
wow,
or resumes. Now, I got to tell you, I hope this doesn't disillusion you, but that didn't happen in the Bush administration.
No, they already sort of knew what they were going to do in some respects.
They would take them, but they didn't solicit them.
Yeah. Yes, they sort of said, we know what we're doing, so, we'll get your advice, but we already have a pretty good idea what we're doing. And Donald Trump's kind of a newbie, and in that respect, I've heard Tony Perkins say the same thing, Gary Bauer say the same thing, and now you, Richard Land, saying, I'm just amazed. We are being asked our opinions in ways that never existed, probably even in the Reagan administration, but certainly not in the Bush administration. Not in the Reagan or Bush 1 or Bush 45. 43. I also think it's important to note that I can't tell you everything I know here, but I can tell you this. This administration is going to have more conservative Christians, Catholic and evangelical, in it than any administration that I've been associated with or had contact with. And I've been doing this since Reagan. This personnel is policy, and I don't know any other way to say it, Kerby. People that you and I would be very comfortable with are being put in place at every level. What about Jeff Sessions? Again, some of these individuals we know, of course, so I want to get to Ben Carson in just a few minutes because I know you know him very well, but Senator Jeff Sessions is being portrayed as somebody from the South and somebody who is really a shady lawyer in a Ku Klux Klan hood. I don't see that working very well for a lot of reasons, because you had a number of African-American pastors even yesterday having a press conference that are speaking on that issue. And so how do we think through this confirmation hearing? Is this just an attempt to damage his name or send a signal, or what is it going on? Do you have any thoughts? It's an attempt to diminish him and diminish his authority as he is being confirmed as Attorney General, and to plant doubts in the minds of people. It's an extremely divisive tactic. It's race baiting in reverse. And it goes back to, when I was a student at Princeton back in the late 60s, I had a professor, a very good professor named Paul Ramsey, a famous ethicist. Oh, sure. Who was from Mississippi. And I took all the classes he taught in the undergraduate curriculum, and we became friends. I mean, he really befriended me and was a mentor to me in many ways. And he said, now, Richard, you understand that some people, now this is in 66, 67, 68. He said, some people hear your accent and they just assume that you have certain views about race that you don't have, in the same way that they hear my Mississippi accent and they assume the same thing. And he said, that's just a prejudice that we're going to have to live with and try to overcome. It's bigotry. It's just bigotry to assume that somebody from Alabama is a racist, or is more likely to be a racist. In fact, the most integrated part of the country now, in terms of enrollment and in terms of residential housing patterns, is the South. Isn't that amazing? We need to take a break, and I want to come back and get to that, because that's another issue. And, of course, I also want to get your thoughts about Representative Tom Price, who could be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, as well as, of course, we mentioned Ben Carson, Housing and Urban Development, and maybe Education, Betsy DeVos. So we'll look at a few of those and then kind of talk about what are some of the key agenda items. Privileged to have with us today, as we have many times before, Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, if I were to ask you to name a national monument, you would probably pick the Washington Monument or the Statue of Liberty. President Obama has a different idea. He designated vast acreages in Utah and Nevada as national monuments. The 1906 Antiquities Act gives the president the authority to create national monuments from federal lands. In recent decades, only a few presidents have used this law. Perhaps the most notable was when President Clinton designated the Grand Staircase Escalante area as a national monument in Utah. President Obama used the Antiquities Law to lock up 1.35 million acres in Utah and another 300,000 acres in Nevada. How did the elected representatives of these areas respond? Well, Utah Senator Mike Lee said that it was an arrogant act by a lame duck president that will not stand. He and other Republican leaders said that there had been painstaking negotiations that would have provided a balanced solution. The president's action stopped all of that. Obviously, we should be concerned about such a rash act by a lame duck president, but there's another issue that also needs to be discussed. Will the federal government ever stop trying to take over more and more Western land? When is enough really enough? Mark Stein reminds us that the federal government already owns 80% of Nevada. That's 90,000 square miles and equal to the landmass of the United Kingdom. Here's another alarming statistic. The Bureau of Land Management rules over 1/8 of the mass of the United States. That is equal to the acreage of France, Germany, and Italy combined. If the BLM were a country, it would be the 26th biggest country in the world. It's time to stop these land grabs and say that the federal government has more than enough land. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation today with Dr. Richard Land. If you'd like to join us at any point, 1-800-351-1212. And Dr. Land, one of the things you talked about is Mike Pence and his influence. And there have been times when vice presidents have had very little influence. I mean, Dan Quayle, for example, don't know how influential he was in Bush 41. But you look at Dick Cheney, look how influencing and how significant he was in terms of the George W. Bush administration. I get the sense right now that Mike Pence is going to be very significant, and we can see this by some of these nominations, can't we?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. I think that he and President-elect Trump get along very well. I think that President-elect Trump has more and more confidence in Mike Pence's judgment. And, of course, Mike Pence has 12 years of legislative experience being a congressman, and then also a couple of years' experience as a governor. So he knows the governors, and he knows the congressmen. He knows how the system works. And I think he's going to be even more influential than Dick Cheney.
I would think so. Let's see if we can get into one of the topics, Dr. Land, that we've been talking about much of the last couple of days and even last week in our weekend edition, and that is the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And there is a push, obviously, to repeal and replace. You have, of course, now a number of individuals from Donald Trump all the way down to Senator Rand Paul saying that you really need to do this simultaneously. So it's caused a lot of people to say, okay, we need to focus not just on the repeal part, but the replace part. Well, Representative Tom Price has put together an Empowering Patients First Act. And if he becomes the Secretary of Health and Human Services, I see a dramatic shift in the Department of HHS, don't you?
No question about it. They couldn't have anyone who is more qualified to take on this Herculean task of repealing and replacing what amounts to 1/6 of the American economy. Tom Price has been working on this issue virtually full time for 6 years as a congressman, and has written numerous legislative proposals to replace Obamacare. And he has the advantage of himself being an orthopedic surgeon, so he is a doctor. And I can't think of anyone that I would be more trustful of in navigating the country through this process of getting rid of this egregious law that has diminished the health care for the vast majority of Americans. I've always said, even when I read the bill when it was being proposed, one of the few people who actually read the entire bill. It took me a week, but I did read it, and there's no question that I came away and I told my wife, I said, if this bill passes, 80 to 85% of Americans will get worse health care, maybe catastrophically worse health care, and some of them will die earlier than they would have, in exchange for giving marginally better care to 10 to 15%. That's a pretty bad trade,
I'd say. You know, one of the things that I wanted to emphasize, in addition, of course, to what you are doing at Southern Evangelical Seminary, is that you, of course, do a commentary, bringing every thought captive. And I'd love to talk about that, because that's a place where people can get information and perspective, especially if they want to contact their member of Congress about things like this issue of Obamacare. So tell us about how people can get some of that kind of information, especially as we're going to probably see some town hall meetings and all sorts of robust debate about this whole issue of health care once again.
Well, thank you, Kerby. They can go to ses.edu, which is our website, and they can follow the prompts that'll take them to Bringing Every Thought Captive. And Bringing Every Thought Captive is a 2-minute commentary on the news of the day that I do every weekday. You can listen to the entire oeuvre, as it would. It would be 2.5 years worth of, and it's all listed there. And so you can go back and look, for instance, to tomorrow's. I just finished taping tomorrow's program, and it's going to be on this catastrophic UN resolution against Israel and why it's so horrendous. And all it does is encourage the radicals on both sides instead of discouraging the radicals on both sides. It's about as counterproductive as anything I can think of that the Obama administration has done since signing the Iran deal.
Well, let's talk about that for another minute. We were going to get into a little bit later some of the conversation related to the State Department, Rex Tillerson. But some of our listeners, of course, have been very concerned about the fact that, again, just to help people understand, it's a Resolution 2443, and it was an opportunity for the United States simply to veto that, but did not. And if I read that carefully, I'd love to get your thoughts about whether or not this affects more than just the West Bank, because it looks like it also could affect the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Western Wall and everything. So you've done the research. What should we think about this particular resolution by the United Nations?
Well, this resolution is horrific because it basically gives the Palestinians everything that they've ever wanted without having to negotiate with the Israelis. It gives the Israelis nothing, and it gives them everything. And it's just a bad resolution. For instance, it says that there are no legitimate Israeli settlements beyond the borders of before June 4th, 1967. Well, of course, that means that Jerusalem most of Jerusalem would go back to the Palestinians. That's never going to happen. Israel is going to keep Jerusalem as a united city. And if they get the chance, what they want is to negotiate with the Palestinians so that, for instance, the Palestinians, they're not going to get the right to return. But in a peace settlement, they could get a restitution. For instance, if their house was confiscated because it was taken over by the Israelis. And remember, let's understand that any Arab territory that was taken over as a consequence of 3 Arab countries attacking Israel, getting ready to attack Israel simultaneously in 1967, the so-called Six-Day War, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. And Israel responded and won. and occupied the West Bank, and occupied the Golan Heights, and occupied Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and the Sinai Peninsula. And they've made peace with Egypt and gave back the Sinai, and they begged the Jordanians not to attack. They told them, they said, don't do this, you're going to regret it. The Jordanians thought the Egyptians and the Syrians would do better than they did, and they ended up losing East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Now, there has to be a two-state solution. If Israel is indeed, as Shimon Peres said, if Israel is going to remain a Jewish state, a democratic state, then it has to have a two-state solution where 7 million Jewish Israelis and about 1.7 million Arab citizens of Israel live in the state of Israel, and about 6 million Arabs live in a Palestinian state on the West Bank in Gaza. But if we're going to have peace, there's going to have to be direct negotiations in which the Palestinians acknowledge Israel's right to exist within secure borders. And the Israelis then will be trading land for assurances of peace. But this takes away any incentive. This resolution takes away any incentive for the Palestinians to in any way, shape, or form negotiate with the Israelis, because they've gotten everything they wanted in the resolution before any negotiations take place.
It seems to me that you could then take the people in the so-called settlements into The Hague and say that this was a crime, or any action that takes place in the West Bank. I mean, this sets a terrible precedent, doesn't it?
Well, it's Mr. Obama has been accused of being the most pro-Palestinian president in American history, and he proved it on December 23rd when they did not veto this resolution. And this is almost impossible to undo, because the Russians will certainly veto any attempt to make this resolution null and void.
Well, again, we need to take a break, and when we come back, let's open up the phones in case you have some comments or questions about some of the nominees, the confirmation process. We're also going to talk about some of the key issues, one of which we've already sort of set on the table, the issue of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Another one, the issue of Israel. And of course, we've just mentioned in passing the Iranian nuclear deal. We'll come back and also talk about education. Betsy DeVos will be going through confirmation hearings tomorrow as Education Secretary. We've mentioned Ben Carson, who was a presidential candidate, and of course, a neurosurgeon, who also is going to be confirmed eventually, but we'll go through confirmation hearings on Thursday. And if you'd like to join us on any of those topics or put some other on the table while we have Dr. Richard Land with us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back and also spend just a minute talking about how you could get a degree from Southern Evangelical Seminary. Don't even have to go to North Carolina to do so. That can be done online. And so we're going to talk about that with Dr. Land, and also encourage you to find out a little bit more about some of his commentaries and other resources that are available as well. If you'd like to join us, though, the number is 1-800-351-1212. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
I remember when I could take a family of 4 out for a simple dinner, and the bill came to around $10 for all of us. That was only about 15 years ago, believe it or not. Now, no way. But here and there, we still go out because it's kind of important to us as a family. Well, I believe that point of view is important, an important investment in all of our families. This is a unique and special time together each weekday. Kerby equips us to make a difference and keeps us aware of what's important to our families. Today, I urge you, many are watching from the sidelines. We need you in the game. Some give. If that's you, thank you. Many need to step up. Join the team, Truth Team 360. You can learn the details at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, click on Become a Monthly Partner. That's right next to the Donate Now button. Become a Monthly Partner. We need you on the team. Please join us. Pointofview.net. Or pick up the phone, call 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of those phone calls in just a minute. Dr. Richard Land with us today. And first of all, Dr. Land, let me say happy anniversary. Now, normally when I say that, I'm talking about you and Becky's anniversary, but I'm talking in this case about 25 years, the 25th anniversary of Southern Evangelical Seminary. There's some material that we have on the website there, and that's a place where, of course, you can find a link to Bringing Every Thought Captive, your commentary, as well as the blog, Why Do You Believe? But this has been 25 years of really preparing individuals so that they are able to give an answer for the hope that is in them.
Well, we are happy to be celebrating our 25th anniversary. We were conceived on January 6th of 1992, and we were born on September 10th when we started classes of 1992. And so we're celebrating our 25th anniversary, and we are grateful to God for the blessings He's given us over these first 25 years. And as we celebrate our silver anniversary, we're looking forward to an even more productive 25 years ahead of us serving the Lord in the Lord's church.
Now, I understand that you are one of the organizations that has been selected as one of the top 10 graduate programs in Christian apologetics. And for just a minute before we take some phone calls, let's talk about how individuals, if they wanted to online or in person attend your lay institute or the various programs that you have, graduate programs, talk about what is available, because you have certificate programs, degree programs, you have a mobile app. There's just a whole way, a lot of different ways, I might say, that individuals listening to this program can connect up with what you have there at Southern Evangelical Seminary.
Well, that's certainly true. They can download the free mobile app, and they get the best of the last 25 years of lectures and presentations at the longest-running apologetics conference, National Apologetics Conference in the country, which we have every October. We have lay institute classes that are non-degree classes, so we have bachelor's degree, master's degrees classes, and doctoral programs, and all available online. My son-in-law did a 2-year Master of Arts in Apologetics class course degree from his den in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he works as a banker during the day. And he did it at night. All of our classes are at night, so people can take them. They can stream them. The majority of our online students are streaming, which means that they take it in real time, able to ask the professors questions in real time, able to interact with their fellow students online in real time. And so, and by the way, Kerby, to a mundane matter, we're cheap.
Yes.
$770 a course for our bachelor's level courses. $1,000 a course for our master's courses, $1,250 a course for our doctoral program. That's about as cheap as you're going to get it, and we do that. It's artificially low because we don't want finances to be the reason that some people don't come back and get better equipped to serve the Lord in the Lord's kingdom. We specialize in apologetics. We do all of our programming is attempt to consciously integrate apologetics, theology, and philosophy to help people take a Judeo-Christian worldview and apply it to the culture, apply it to the lives of people that we meet, and to present a strongly, overtly Christian worldview.
Very good. So again, ses.edu, we have information about that, and also a link to Dr. Richard Land's website as well. And let's take some phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. In Texas, first of all, KAVX. Gerald, you're on with Dr. Richard Land.
Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you for taking my call. For a long time, I've been thinking about the Israelis and everybody's wanting to give that land back that they took in '67. And to me, that removes all restraints against their enemies because they can attack at any time and know that if they lose, they'll get the land back. So there's nothing to restrain them from attacking them.
Dr.
Well,
Land?
the only thing to restrain them right now is the Israeli Defense Force, which would pretty much give them a pretty bad headache if they tried. But the pre-67 borders are really indefensible borders, and the Israelis are not going back to those borders. They're not going to give East Jerusalem back, and they shouldn't. Both Muslims and Christians, as well as Jews, have had more access to the holy sites in Jerusalem under Israeli occupation than they have had under any kind of Palestinian rule prior to that. And so, the Israelis, they do need us to, we're either going to get a two-state solution, or we're going to have to fall back on what John Bolton calls a three-state solution, which is Egypt takes Gaza Strip back, and Jordan takes the West Bank back, and Israel remains in Israel and the Golan Heights and the rest of Jerusalem. The Palestinians have got to recognize Israel's right to exist within stable and defensible borders, and they need to make peace with them. If the Palestinians wanted peace as badly as the Israelis do, we'd have peace. But they don't. They still are under this mantra that they can somehow drive the Jews into the sea, and they can retake all of biblical Israel and make it part of the Muslim part of the Muslim world. And that's not going to happen. There were Jews in Samaria and Judea a long time before there were any Arabs. They've been there for millennia, and they're not leaving. It's their homeland. And the Obama administration and John Kerry just didn't get it. At least I hope they didn't get it. I hope they didn't realize what they've done. If they do, then they're despicable.
When you say the Palestinians, you've traveled over there, I have as well, you meet some Palestinians that are quite content and would love to have a two-state solution, but when your leaders are Arafat or Abbas or somebody like that, or Hamas or Hezbollah, that is the problem, isn't it, in terms of getting to a point where there would be a willingness to recognize the right of Israel to be a sovereign nation? Isn't that the problem, some of the leadership?
Yes. I've been over there several times. I've met with Palestinians who feel like they're not being well served by their leadership. There is a peace to be made with people of goodwill who are Palestinian Arabs and people of goodwill who are Israeli Arabs. But the Israelis already have given everything they can give under President Barak in his negotiations at Camp David. And the Palestinians said no. Well, at that point, then people like Ariel Sharon started getting more and more influence because more and more Israelis said, well, if we can't make peace with these people, if they won't make peace with us, then we'd better be prepared to be at war with them.
So again, that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. And again, that brings us to a really contentious confirmation hearing on Wednesday with Rex Tillerson. Now, Dr. Land, one of the things we talked about is, his connection with Russia. But the other one that we've pointed out, and Tony Perkins, I think, was the first one to mention the fact that this is a guy that we've been fighting on some of these Boy Scout issues. And so on the one hand, certainly the remarkable change from a John Kerry or a Hillary Clinton to Rex Tillerson will be positive. But in terms of some aspects of what he holds to, have you heard some of the same concerns that we've talked about here on this program?
Well, I have. I have. There are concerns. Now, the abortion concern evidently has been overblown. We'll see in the hearings. But
yes,
what I've been told is that the only contributions that Exxon has made to Planned Parenthood have been matching contributions, where employees have made donations, and Exxon has promised if you give to a charity, we'll match it. And so when they give to Planned Parenthood, they have matched it. I'm more troubled by his actions in the Boy Scout situation. He evidently was an integral part of pushing the agenda of having homosexual scouts in the Scouts, and that troubles me, especially since the State Department has been very active under Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Kerry in pushing for gay rights around the world. But I'm going to make a prediction for you. I've seen Rex Tillerson in action. I don't know if you have. Have you, Kerby?
Yeah, I've been to a couple of the meetings where he was chairing it, shareholders meetings, because I've been in Dallas. Go ahead.
I've watched him. I was at a Council on Foreign Relations meeting, and he was invited in. Now, you understand, this guy's an international oil executive.
Yep.
That's just one rung above tobacco companies when it comes to liberals. I mean,
Yeah.
And he gave about a 45-minute speech, and then took questions for 45 minutes. And I told my wife that was the most John Connolly-like performance I've seen.
Wow.
I mean, it was like John Connolly on steroids. He owned the room. I mean, one liberal woman, who, if I mentioned her name, you would know her, said to me, "Well, now, wow, that was impressive." I mean, Rex Tillerson is going to blow these guys away.
Well, we will find that out on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. Let's take a break. We'll finish up our conversation with Dr. Richard Land right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Kirsten was interviewed for a story by the base newspaper entitled Meet Your Leadership. The Q&A article ranged from why Kirsten joined the Air Force to his proudest achievements as an officer in the United States Air Force. One question really annoyed Mikey Weinstein, an activist that often decries the presence of religion within the United States military. The question asked, is there a leader from your career that influenced you the most? It was Colonel Kirsten's answer that sent Weinstein searching for his computer to type out an angry letter to the base commander. Kirsten answered simply, "As a Christian, my example is to be like Christ. He is my guide and affects all of my decisions." Weinstein was apoplectic. He denounced Kirsten's answer as proselytization and condemned its presence in a base publication as favoritism to Christianity. Worse, Weinstein demanded that Kirsten be, quote, visibly punished. But visibly punishing someone for exercising their religion would be the precise opposite of religious freedom. We do not haul people who exercise their religious liberty to the center of a military base and visibly punish them. That's not freedom. Sorry, Mr. Weinstein, we protect the religious liberty of all Americans, including our servicemen and women, because religious freedom is a human right, a right not sacrificed in service to our country. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone, but that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes as we talk with today Dr. Richard Land. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Missouri, KCMH. Dave, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Yes, I wanted to ask you if you've heard about the Obama administration ordering the FCC to require AM stations to lower their power at night so they don't go as far. So they don't go any further at night than they would during the day.
Or some of the AM stations do have to do that, but Dr. Land, that sounds like conversation for the national religious broadcasters because a fair number of...
It does.
Yeah, go ahead.
It does. It does. It sounds like something we can certainly look into it. One of the advantages of having a former student as the head of NRB is you can call him up on the phone.
I might just mention that. Jerry Johnson, yes, as the president.
Say, hey, Jerry, was there any truth to this? Jerry's doing a great job.
Yes, he is. Let's give him credit. And, of course, Catherine here actually worked with him. Yeah.
Well, Criswell College's loss was NRB's gain.
Yes. Well, Criswell College over the years has trained a lot of great individuals. You are just one of many. Paige Patterson, of course, started the Richard Land Center for Cultural Engagement there at Southwestern Baptist Seminary. And, of course, we mentioned Jerry Johnson, who's now the president of the National Religious Broadcasters. So that has been a fount of all sorts of great productions over the years. So, again, just shout out to our friends at Criswell College. Before we take another phone call, I just wanted to get at least one comment from you about Ben Carson. I would hope in some respects he was going to be the Surgeon General or the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He ended up getting put in Housing and Urban Development and originally said he didn't know if he felt qualified, so we'll see if they bring that up on Thursday. But he is just one of those genuinely nice people, and sometimes I say probably one of the brightest people in the room. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's certainly the case. I mean, the man is a neurosurgeon after all, a world-renowned neurosurgeon. But at first blush, I was a little surprised that they wanted him to do housing and urban development. But, he is a product of the inner city, and he has seen what the federal government's housing policies have done to the inner city. And I think he's got some innovative ideas on ways in which the federal government can have policies that are beneficial and not counterproductive. Same thing's true with Betsy DeVos. That's going to be one you're going to want to get some popcorn and sit down and watch that hearing.
That's tomorrow.
The liberals are going to come after her with everything they've got because she wants to empower parents to make decisions for their children's education. And the public teacher unions know that, particularly in our inner cities, in our big cities, that unless the public schools have a monopoly on to children, that the parents are going to choose alternative education for their children because, we're wasting the greatest resource we have, Kerby, which is our young people.
That's true.
We have many young people who are being significantly undereducated in our nation's public schools, and particularly in the inner cities. And the charter schools do better on standardized testing than the public schools or private schools. The only ones who do better on testing than charter schools are homeschoolers. And they can learn. I remember when the Zelman v. Simmons-Harris case came down, where the Supreme Court ruled that tuition vouchers and aid that goes to parents is not government aid. It's not a violation of separation of church and state for the parents to then choose a Catholic school or a Jewish school or some other school for their children. And the reason they put that in place was that the state of Ohio gave vouchers to parents whose children were in schools where over half of them were failing the basic skills test. And in 1 year, those kids had an average of 4 years advance in reading skills.
Amazing.
It wasn't they couldn't learn, they weren't being taught.
Well said.
And you know the studies as well as I do, that if a child is reading on grade level, by the time they're in the fourth grade, they've got an 80% chance of escaping poverty, even if they are being reared in poverty. But if they are not reading on grade level by the time they're in the fourth grade, they've got a 60% chance of ending up in poverty or in jail or both.
Yes.
Now, no fourth grader is responsible for whether he or she has learned to read or not. That's the adult's responsibility. And we have failed our children.
Well, again, that's going to be tomorrow at 10 a.m. because Eastern Time. You'll have a chance to, we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. Betsy DeVos, Education Secretary. And I'll take some more phone calls in the next hour, but I had one on Southern Baptist Convention, and since you've been president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, I thought, Dr. Land, maybe you could help answer this question from Jim in Nevada, KNLB. Jim, thank you for joining us today. You're on with Dr. Richard Land.
Yes, real quick. I guess I have two questions. One is recently the Southern Baptist Convention got involved with an amicus brief helping a mosque be built in New Jersey. And, I guess they're doing it with a bunch of other religions. And I know it says in the Bible not to be yoked with non-Christians. And that seems to be definitely getting it wrong there. The second thing is, I guess we also have a non-governmental organization, an NGO in the United Nations. So I'm kind of really concerned, being a Southern Baptist pretty much all my life. I'm like going, wait a second, this sounds like, we're going the wrong direction here. And, so we got like a church, probably ready to split because of this. So,
okay.
Anyway,
Dr.
Well,
Land,
don't split your church over it, please. I've been a Southern Baptist most of my life too, and am still one. Will die one. Let me first of all address the second question, which is when I was head of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, one of our responsibilities was to fulfill the NGO status at the United Nations. And that's a good thing, because what we do there is we can go in and we can work for religious freedom for people around the world. And, Christians are the most persecuted people around the world right now. Mm-hmm. We can also speak to human rights. I went as part of our status as NGO. I went to I've been to a couple of world population summits where we have fought with the Vatican and with the Catholics for pro-life issues against our own government under Bill Clinton, who is trying to force countries to do abortions and birth control as a requirement to get government aid. And we were able to help stop that. So having a voice at the UN and being able to speak up for the sanctity of human life and being able to speak up for freedom of conscience is a good thing. Now, when it comes to the filing on the amicus brief for the mosque, I understand why they did that, because we believe that Muslims should have the right to have places of worship, just like Christians ought to have the right to places of worship, not necessarily anywhere they want to. We don't have that right. I don't think they should have one in the shadow of the 9/11 Twin Towers, for instance. The Japanese have the right to have temples, Shinto temples in Honolulu, but not within sight of the USS Arizona. That's just not good manners.
Yes, very good.
But I also I was involved in one of these issues, and it's very clear. Southern Baptists have made it very clear that they believe that Muslims have the right to have mosques, and that they have the right to petition the government to have mosques, but that they don't want Southern Baptists doing the petitioning for them.
Sure. And we're out of time, but I wish we had a little more. I might also mention you served on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, but if people want to write to you and ask a little bit more about that, Dr. Land, they can do that, can't they?
After they can contact me at rdland@ses.edu.
Always great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us. Let's do it again
Kerby,
soon.
Great to be with you. All right.
When listeners call in, we never know what they're going to say, and sometimes they shock us, like Jacob did.
We as Christians, we should learn to support ministries like yours that is reaching out and shining light into darkness. This is why Satan has such a great grip on America and the world, is because the world support their own. They will spend billions of dollars to make sure they are heard. The Lord is working a great work through Point of View.
We are thankful for listeners like Jacob and you who become part of our family, a real part, by sacrificing to support the work of Point of View. Take Jacob's words to heart and support us today. Enable us to continue shining God's light into the darkness. We honestly cannot do it without you. Visit pointofview.net. Look for the Donate Now button or call 800-347-5151 or send a gift to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. If you just joined us, Dr. Richard Land was with us the first hour. Spent a little bit of time talking about some of the confirmation hearings. They began today with Senator Jeff Sessions, who has been tapped as the Attorney General, and those took place in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Just a few minutes, the ones in the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs will take place for John Kelly, who's been tapped as the Secretary of Homeland Security. As Dr. Land pointed out, tomorrow the one on education is going to be quite contentious with Betsy DeVos, and then also, of course, another one that might be contentious, a Secretary of State who has been tapped is Rex Tillerson. That will be in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out tomorrow. And then on Thursday, you have a number of others. And by the way, I might mention Elaine Chao for transportation. And then on Thursday, you have housing and urban development. And that will, of course, be Ben Carson, as we talked about this last hour, Commerce, Wilbur Ross, and many more after that. The argument being made right now by some of the Democrats is we can't rush this process. And yet they can't really stand on history because, as I pointed out just a few minutes ago, you had 10 individuals, nominees, who were confirmed by the first week of the administration by Barack Obama. As a matter of fact, on the day in which he was inaugurated, the Secretaries of Agriculture, Education, Energy, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Interior, and the VA were all confirmed. Of course, a day later, then you had Secretary of State. That was Hillary Clinton. By the way, confirmed by a vote of 95-2. I don't think Rex Tillerson will be confirmed by a vote of 95-2. And then also transportation that next day. And probably the most contentious of those nominations would probably have been Eric Holder, although Tim Geithner might have been in that category too, because some people wondered whether he cheated on his income taxes. Not necessarily the case. But even Eric Holder was confirmed 75-21. And just have difficulty believing that Jeff Sessions will be confirmed by a vote of 75-21. So in some respects, it goes the other way. And so this is something that Chuck Schumer has talked about, that he has really vowed to try to lead the Senate Democrats in an unprecedented manner by trying to postpone these confirmation hearings and postponing a vote till March, which, of course, would mean that the individuals that would be serving under Donald Trump would actually be left over from the Obama administration. So we'll see how that plays itself out. And of course, you have some that are simply saying, we have served with Jeff Sessions for years, but then all of a sudden come out of the woodwork to say, he just certainly could not be the Attorney General. And probably the one that is getting the most visibility right now is Cory Booker. Now, Cory Booker, I think, is your odds-on nominee for the individual that might run for the presidency next time, although, of course, people have talked about whether Hillary Clinton would run again or whether or not even Barack Obama would try to figure out a way to have Michelle Obama run or something like that. But, many people think he's kind of the odds-on favorite. And he's going to do something that has never really been done in modern times, where a sitting senator will actually speak against a senator being considered for a cabinet post. And Cory Booker said, I do not take this lightly, the decision to testify against a Senate colleague. But the immense powers of the Attorney General combined with the deeply troubling views of this nominee is a call to conscience. And so that's what Cory Booker is saying. But some people have done a little bit of a flashback and pointed out that less than a year ago, Here's what Cory Booker said about Jeff Sessions. And again, I'm giving you a quote. He says, "And this is truly one of my life's greatest moments. I'm humbled to be able to participate here in paying tribute to some of the extraordinary Americans whose footsteps paved the way for me and my generation." He said, "I feel blessed and honored to have partnered with Senator Jeff Sessions in being the Senate sponsor of this important award." So right off the bat, you can see that when he's a Senate colleague, everything is fine. I'm honored to work with him and to bestow these honors and to serve with him in the Senate. But the moment he might be the Attorney General in a Trump administration, well, then it's a matter of conscience to go out and testify against him. Of course, one of the other people that wants to testify against Jeff Sessions is an individual by the name of John Lewis. Now, those of us that know our history know him very well because he has been a civil rights icon. He's a Democrat, and he is expected to testify against Jeff Sessions as well as a member of the Congress and the House of Representatives. But again, some people have pointed out some various photos where John Lewis and Jeff Sessions are pictured holding hands during a march in Selma, Alabama. That has to do with something that happened a little less than 2 years ago, in which they were holding hand upon hand at the Pettus Bridge, which is a famous location for what was called Bloody Sunday, and that was the 50th anniversary. So again, why is John Lewis holding hands with somebody he's going to say is a racist? I think we know the answer, and that is because now he'll serve as the Attorney General, and that's reason enough to contradict any of the previous actions and statements he's made before. So again, we're going to get into the issue of Obamacare again because we have some new information on that. But just before we do that, I thought I might mention that tonight you will be able to watch, if you would like to do so, the farewell address by President Barack Obama. Now, in the past, some farewell addresses have been very significant. Others have not been as significant. Ronald Reagan's from the Oval Office, certainly one of those. The typical reaction has been this. Most presidents have actually delivered their farewell address in Washington, D.C., and then after the inauguration have left town and gone somewhere else. Barack Obama is going to reverse this. He is actually in Chicago to deliver this message tonight. And then he has decided he will stay in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, the other day in his final weekly radio address, made it very clear that he was not going to retire quietly, but instead is really planning to stay around and will stay in Washington, D.C. I mean, the last time we had a president stay in Washington, D.C., I believe was Woodrow Wilson, and that's in part because he'd had a stroke, and there were all sorts of reasons why not to move him. So there's always been kind of the idea that, okay, my time is up, and so Ronald Reagan goes to California, or Bill Clinton goes, of course, he was going to go to Arkansas, but ends up going to New York because that's where Hillary was, and of course, George W. Bush goes back to Texas. You know the routine. You've probably seen it before. Instead, he's going to stay down the street and, in a sense, be the titular head of the Democratic Party and probably end up trying to be a thorn in the side of the Trump administration. But nevertheless, tonight, his speech will be one that Valerie Jarrett says is not a victory lap speech. His intention is to motivate people to get involved and fight for their democracy. She says you can't take that for granted. You have to work hard at it. It's not easy, and you have to be vigilant and determined. Some people have wondered whether or not this will be an opportunity for him to take a shot at Donald Trump and on the Trump administration. We don't know. And I don't know that up until a few hours ago, President Obama knew, because it's interesting. I love this. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said that the President Barack Obama, is still working on the speech, writing out parts in longhand, dictating speech to speechwriters, then revising it. Said it'll be much shorter than the State of the Union address, but we'll have a chance to hear what he has to say. And if there's some significant elements of it, we might even play some of the clips tomorrow. Let's take a break. When we come back, some new things on this issue of Obamacare, and I will certainly welcome your phone calls on that or other issues we've discussed. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, if I were to ask you to name a national monument, you would probably pick the Washington Monument or the Statue of Liberty. President Obama has a different idea. He designated vast acreages in Utah and Nevada as national monuments. The 1906 Antiquities Act gives the president the authority to create national monuments from federal lands. In recent decades, only a few presidents have used this law. Perhaps the most notable was when President Clinton designated the Grand Staircase Escalante area as a national monument in Utah. President Obama used the Antiquities Law to lock up 1.35 million acres in Utah and another 300,000 acres in Nevada. How did the elected representatives of these areas respond? Well, Utah Senator Mike Lee said that it was an arrogant act by a lame duck president that will not stand. He and other Republican leaders said that there had been painstaking negotiations that would have provided a balanced solution. The president's action stopped all of that. Obviously, we should be concerned about such a rash act by a lame duck president, but there's another issue that also needs to be discussed. Will the federal government ever stop trying to take over more and more Western land? When is enough really enough? Mark Stein reminds us that the federal government already owns 80% of Nevada. That's 90,000 square miles and equal to the landmass of the United Kingdom. Here's another alarming statistic. The Bureau of Land Management rules over 1/8 of the mass of the United States. That is equal to the acreage of France, Germany, and Italy combined. If the BLM were a country, it would be the 26th biggest country in the world. It's time to stop these land grabs and say that the federal government has more than enough land. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Just a minute, I want to get into some of the debate on repeal and replace about Obamacare, because the strategy now seems to be that the Democrats are going to raise the issue of the price of drugs, prescription drugs. And so in just a minute, I'd love to get a comment or two from some of you that have to pay some just incredible prices for some of these drugs, and see how that may affect in very significant ways this whole debate about repeal and replace of Obamacare. But just real quickly, let me just mention that as we always do here on Point of View, every day we post a number of articles. The first one today is on the confirmation war. This is a very good piece by Robert Knight. I mentioned it yesterday, and again, we've been talking about some of the confirmation issues in the first hour with Dr. Richard Land. And by the way, if you still have comments about that, we'll certainly take phone calls. But the second one, I just wanted to mention in passing, and we might get back to it a little bit later, and that is what I call culture and the left. We have talked about on this program so many times that even though you might win a political battle, the culture is sort of upstream from politics, or politics is downstream from culture. What I mean by that is you could win every election and still lose the culture. And the example that David French uses is the speech Sunday night by Meryl Streep. I mentioned a little bit yesterday, and to understand his comments, you've got to understand that David French seriously considered running against Donald Trump as a third-party candidate. So this, as he says, I have no particular affection for Donald Trump. You think? But I positively loathe, he says, the condescension, alarmism, ignorance, and self-regard of the wealthy Hollywood left, and each of those elements was on full display in a Meryl Streep speech. So he wants to break it into four areas, so I'm going to talk about those real quickly, and then we'll take some phone calls as well. The first is what he calls condescension. He says, not content to take a shot at Trump for apparently insulting a disabled reporter, she made the puzzling statement that the insult was designed to get his audience to show their teeth. And the point he's making is, by the way, I don't think he was insulting the reporter because of his disability, but disagreeing with him. But anyway, we'll leave that for another day. But the point he's making is this idea of show their teeth. And David French says this is kind of dehumanizing language that would outrage her if was applied to anyone other than the Trump's crowd of Republicans. Moreover, he says, does she not understand the deficiencies of her chosen candidate? Of course, it would be Hillary Clinton. Does she not know that millions of people voted for Donald Trump in spite of his personal attacks and not because they love his insults? And so, first of all, he hated her condescension. The second was he talked about the alarmism. That is, Meryl Streep raised the specter, he says, that Trump would expel outsiders and foreigners, leaving Hollywood bereft of talent. It is anyone proposing the deportation of legal immigrant Hollywood actors. Is anyone proposing that we kick out the wealthy Americans from South Carolina and Florida that Meryl Streep singled out in her speech is somehow vulnerable? So again, just the whole alarmism. So first, condescension. Second, alarmism. Number 3, ignorance. He says Meryl Streep claimed that once America kicks out outsiders and foreigners, we'll be left with nothing but football and mixed martial arts to entertain us. By the way, you should got to see some of the tweets that came from some of the mixed martial arts people, but that's again off the topic for just a minute. But he said the MMA world would be nothing without its foreign fighters and champions. And then he goes, look at the list. You see men and women from across the globe. As for outsiders, for every Hollywood actor with a tough upbringing, there are 50 NFL athletes who came from nothing to achieve athletic greatness. So again, he kind of attacks or at least critiques her condescension, her alarmism, her ignorance, and then finally self-regard. He says Meryl Streep firmly and fully believes that she and her colleagues are on the side of the angels, standing bravely against the bullies who would degrade our culture and denigrate our citizens. Yet it is the cultural left that has raised bullying to an art form, commandeering immensely powerful institutions to exact vengeance on those who dissent from leftist orthodoxy. And he goes on for a number of pages to explain that. And again, we post that so that you can read it on your own. But if you want to start a conversation on your Facebook page, that piece by David French, who, as he says, is certainly no fan of Donald Trump, seriously considered running as a third-party candidate against Donald Trump, but nevertheless had real problems with the speech by Meryl Streep because it represented so many reasons why there are people that are still disturbed by what comes out of Hollywood. But let's take some phone calls along the way. If you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. On the Good News Network in Georgia, Alan, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, thank you, Kerby, and God bless you and everything that you do. My comment is concerning the repeal and replace of Obamacare. I wholeheartedly agree with, we need to have something in place to, keep people from having the rug snatched out from underneath them.
Sure.
But, as far as the penalty for those that aren't able to afford, even through Obamacare, you're having to pay a penalty against a product that the government has forced you to buy, which is unconstitutional, as we all know. That should be something that is at the very onset done away with. It should be repealed immediately. There should be no one that has to pay a penalty for not buying a private bill of goods or service. What's
called the individual mandate, because again, we used the phrase the other day, the working poor or the challenged, the individuals that find themselves in a situation where I'm trying to choose whether or not to pay the rent or buy health insurance or buy food or health insurance. We should never force somebody to make that choice. And frankly, we could go back to a system where we would provide you with at least a catastrophic health care plan that would cover you for really unbelievable costs that would come from kidney dialysis or cancer or something like that. And you are a broadcast, you're calling from the state of Georgia that used to provide that. That's why those of you in Georgia had such sticker shock, because they said, look, there are some people that find themselves in Atlanta or Augusta or wherever they might be, Macon, they would just say, look, I can't afford, a really expensive policy, but I'll take even a silver policy or a bronze policy or a tin policy. I'm making this up, of course, that at least gives me some kind of coverage. And when the Obama administration said, no, the lowest rung is more expensive than you can afford, and you're going to have to pay for it anyway or pay for a penalty, that's where we really hurt those individuals, don't you think?
Yeah, yes, sir. This is called socialism, not democracy. When you're taking money from someone else to give it to somebody else. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I don't want anyone to be without some type of coverage.
Well, I think we should provide that for them, yes. And I think they should provide it for themselves. If they can't provide it, we'll have a health savings account, so we put money in there so they have something.
Exactly.
So they don't have to always go to an emergency room just for primary care. There are solutions to this. Yeah.
And my wife and I, we were paying over $800 just for the two of us through Obamacare. $800 a month.
Yes.
And we couldn't afford that.
Well, and I don't pay that, and of course I work more than one job, but, again, it's just the people don't understand how tight some of the financial circumstances are for the American people. And when you live in Washington, D.C., and everybody is rich, and everybody has been able to get government care, you get insulated from some of that. You just go out into the workaday world. That red state that Hillary Clinton didn't want to go to because she just wanted to pile up all her votes in the blue states. You begin to realize what life is like in the real world, where many of us actually live. Well, Alan, I appreciate your phone call. I appreciate you calling. I'm coming to a break, and we'll come back and take some more phone calls, but his point is well taken. And when I come back, I want to talk about how this whole debate about prescription drugs, something I haven't talked about, but Dr. Merrill Matthews, writing in Forbes magazine, talks about that, how this could affect the whole debate about repeal and replace. So if you'd like to join our conversation, especially like to hear from some of you that have to pay quite a bit for prescription drugs, I'll put some of that on the table, and I want to hear your comments. While we're going to a break, I do want to encourage you to go and find some of the articles we've posted here today on the website, pointofview.net, and also mention that we've encouraged some of you that can maybe save some money and would like to travel with us to Alaska. We are going to do our Alaska cruise, and again, it is August 5th through the 12th. It's an opportunity to spend time not only with my family, but with Kelly Shackelford's family and Penna Dexter's family and some of the other individuals that will be part of that cruise, and to meet some of the other listeners to Point of View. So if you can see your way clear to join us, I would encourage you to go to our website, pointofview.net. Click on that banner there, get a brochure, and think about it, and maybe even get more than one and pass it on to some friends. And this could be a great opportunity for a family reunion, or just a great opportunity for all of us to explore the wilds of Alaska. It's the one event we're going to do this year with you, and we would encourage you to join with us as we participate in that. Let's take a break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about prescription drug costs, Obamacare, repeal and replace, all that coming up right after this.
I remember when I could take a family of 4 out for a simple dinner, and the bill came to around $10 for all of us. That was only about 15 years ago, believe it or not. Now, no way. But here and there, we still go out because it's kind of important to us as a family. Well, I believe that point of view is important, an important investment in all of our families. This is a unique and special time together each weekday. Kerby equips us to make a difference and keeps us aware of what's important to our families. Today, I urge you, many are watching from the sidelines. We need you in the game. Some give. If that's you, thank you. Many need to step up. Join the team, Truth Team 360. You can learn the details at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, click on Become a Monthly Partner. That's right next to the Donate Now button. Become a Monthly Partner. We need you on the team. Please join us. pointofview.net. Or pick up the phone, call 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, spending a little bit of time talking about this ongoing debate that will be taking place for quite some time on the whole issue of repeal and replace with the issue of Obamacare. And then we'll get into some of the protests being planned against the inauguration of Donald Trump. We'll get into more of that as we get closer to the inauguration, but there's a very good piece by Michael Snyder we might get to a little bit later. But let's, if we can, get into this issue of repeal and replace as it relates to the issue of prescription drugs. Dr. Merrill Matthews has been on the program with us many times before, writing in Forbes just the other day, said this: Democrats have a plan to distract Republicans from repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. You might call it Democrats on drugs. He said they know it's unlikely that they can procedurally stop the repeal and replace effort, but Democrats may be able to sidetrack Republicans by demanding that they include extraneous provisions that divide the party, thereby making it more difficult, if not impossible, to pass repeal and replace legislation. For example, Senators Sherrod Brown and Al Franken sent a letter co-signed by 17 other Democrat and independent senators to President-elect Donald Trump outlining several steps they claim will control the price of prescription drugs. It is a grab bag, you might say, of all sorts of different things, where they would let the Secretary of Health and Human Services negotiate. And I love Dr. Merrill Matthews said, read, dictate drug prices, impose price controls, allow government bureaucrats to determine what it costs to develop a new drug, and open the door to importing drugs from foreign countries. The difficulty with this is this: if you're a drug company, you don't know which next drug is going to be a success. So you pursue lots of research, and out of that research, a small, very, very small fraction of those look possibly worthwhile. Then you have to go through all sorts of drug trials before you might even get FDA approval. And then there may be contraindications and even possible lawsuits. So the possibility of one of those being successful is pretty slim. But then if you have bureaucrats determining what they think it should cost for you to produce a new drug, you can see the difficulty. Now, does Big Pharma sometimes have predatory pricing? You know, I mean, we've got some stories that have surfaced there. But when you start saying that I'm going to let some bureaucrat, I don't even know who that might be, determine how much you could actually charge for that particular drug, that's the difficulty. And the bigger issue is the whole idea of importing drugs from foreign countries, because some people have said, well, do I have to buy them here? Could I buy them in Canada? Could I buy them from the UK? Whatever it might be. Well, here, what Dr. Merrill Matthews points out is that Democrats hope no one will remember that it was they, that is the Democrats who controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House in 2009 and 2010. And if prescription drug price controls and importation were a priority, why didn't they pass the legislation then? Well, they didn't. They didn't even include those provisions in Obamacare, and it wasn't because they would lose Republican votes, since no Republicans voted for the law anyway. Dr. Merrill Matthews goes on to say, by now, Democrats surely know that prescription drug importation is a failed policy. In the mid-2000s, 7 states and 2 cities created some kind of importation program, but they all shut down within a few years. And then, for our listeners up there in Maine, guess what? You had a federal judge just the other day rule that Maine's law allowing people in Maine to buy prescription drugs by mail from other countries. Again, for those of you that don't live in Maine, Maine is so close to Canada, it's almost like they're closer to Canada than they are to many other states. So buying, for example, drugs from Canada, quite easy. But a federal judge actually overturned the law and prevented that from taking place. And so you have the situation we have right now. There's another part to this, and that is there's probably only one government program in the last 20 or 30 years I can think of that has been really successful and under budget. You might say, okay, what is that? I'm waiting to hear. It would be Part D of the issue of Medicaid and Medicare, and that is the Medicare Modernization Act that was passed actually provides what is called Part D prescription drug benefit, and it is, again, one of the very few federal programs that came in under budget. And yet, interestingly enough, Democrats swore repeatedly that Obamacare would lower health insurance premiums while maintaining your right to keep your policy and your physician. Now tell us that we can negotiate a better deal on prescription drugs. Well, that's why you can imagine that Dr. Merrill Matthews is a little bit skeptical. But it's one more aspect of this repeal and replace debate that's taking place, that now we're going to be hearing about the cost of prescription drugs. And so we'll certainly take that on as another issue to address here on Point of View. Let's take some phone calls, though. If you'd like to join our conversation this last half hour, an open line on anything we've talked about so far, we'll head to California, KYCC. Lynn, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Oh, thank you. It's not about the prescription drugs. I just had a comment about the cabinet appointment.
Sure.
And I just thought, when you were discussing it, how interesting it is that the senators, can get up and act and stand on their conscience, but Christian bakers and florists, they
great
are
line.
not allowed to.
Oh, you're so good. Again, Cory Booker, I think he's going to be our next Democratic presidential nominee 4 years from now. I mean, it's too early to tell, but, he's a senator and he's well-liked and he has the potential as a communicator. And so, I take him at his word that he feels like he really wanted to violate Senate privilege and precedent by actually going and testifying against a Senate colleague because, after all, it was a matter of conscience. And so, I also wonder if it positions himself to be the next presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party for the presidency. But your point's well taken. You win the award for the best connection. Why some of the Rockettes could not in good conscience perform at the inauguration. We can understand why some in good conscience say they could not dress Melania for the inaugural ball, and we can understand all of that, and we can understand why Cory Booker in good conscience cannot let this go without testifying against Jeff Sessions. But boy, if you're a baker or a photographer or a florist or an innkeeper and you cannot in good conscience participate in a same-sex wedding, we're going to drive you to bankruptcy. So that's a good point.
Yep. Yes. So those were just my thoughts.
Well, they're good thoughts. You win the award today for one of the best ideas. So hadn't even thought about that particular issue. So that, again, just gives you a little bit of a sense of where that is going to be taking place. And again, don't forget that the president will be giving a farewell speech tonight. And I certainly look forward to hearing that. And even though it's not like a State of the Union address, if there's some audio that we think was worthwhile, we might play some of that tomorrow. And we'll give you just a little better idea of what he said and see what will happen next. And as I pointed out, the president has made it very clear that unlike other presidents, he is not planning to leave. He is planning to stay. He has actually said, for example, quote, "As I prepare to take on the even more important role of citizen, know that I will be there with you every step of the way to ensure that this country forever strives to live up to the incredible promise of our founding, that all of us are created equal and all of us deserve a chance to live out our dreams." And that was part of his radio address. I suspect that many of those lines will show up tonight in his farewell address, which he does in Chicago. It's going to be at the McCormick Place Convention Center, the largest in North America. That will be the venue, less than 4 miles from Grant Park, which was the site of the victory speech by President Obama. And so we will see whether or not that is going to be one that is going to live for the ages, or whether it will be one we'll hear and simply forget about. If I were to ask you to remember anything out of, say, the farewell speech of George Herbert Walker Bush, or even of Bill Clinton or George W. Bush, I'm sure many of you might remember it. I think some of us can remember parts of the speech from Ronald Reagan, but most of the time farewell speeches are certainly fun to listen to, but they aren't memorable. Well, we'll see whether or not that's the case. It is, by the way, one of the hottest tickets in town. People stood in 0-degree weather outside of McCormick Place for hours last Saturday for a ticket. By noon, the tickets were being offered on Craigslist for $1,000 apiece. So we'll give you a chance to hear this, and we won't charge you anything. And this will probably be the last Air Force One flight that he will take. It's Possible between now and January 20th, he might take another one, but not likely. So this may be the last time he's actually on the presidential aircraft. So there are all sorts of significant events that will take place tonight. And if any of those are worth reporting tomorrow, we'll talk about those here on Point of View. When we come back, I'll take some more phone calls if you'd like to join us. 1-800-351-1212. If not, I wanted to talk just briefly about what the anarchists and some of the protesters are planning. They want to turn the Trump inauguration on January 20th into one of the biggest riots in U.S. history. Let's hope not. We'll talk about that. Take some more of your phone calls right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Kirsten was interviewed for a story by the base newspaper entitled Meet Your Leadership. The Q&A article ranged from why Kirsten joined the Air Force to his proudest achievements as an officer in the United States Air Force. One question really annoyed Mikey Weinstein, an activist that often decries the presence of religion within the United States military. The question asked, is there a leader from your career that influenced you the most? It was Colonel Kirsten's answer that sent Weinstein searching for his computer to type out an angry letter to the base commander. Kirsten answered simply, as a Christian, my example is to be like Christ. He is my guide and affects all of my decisions. Weinstein was apoplectic. He denounced Kirsten's answer as proselytization and condemned its presence in a base publication as favoritism to Christianity. Worse, Weinstein demanded that Kirsten be, quote, visibly punished. But visibly punishing someone for exercising their religion would be the precise opposite of religious freedom. We do not haul people who exercise their religious liberty to the center of a military base and visibly punish them. That's not freedom. Sorry, Mr. Weinstein, we protect the religious liberty of all Americans, including our servicemen and women, because religious freedom is a human right, a right not sacrificed in service to our country. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Some people think our religious freedom will soon be gone, but that's not true. The fact is that First Liberty, a national network of America's top attorneys, is winning over 90% of our cases. We defend religious freedom for people like you. Go to firstliberty.org and read the exciting story. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
For a few more minutes, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let me just mention that tomorrow we're going to start off with a conversation with Rob Warren. He has actually been able to figure out a way in which Donald Trump could indeed make Mexico pay for the wall. Right now, you have the Washington Post and others reporting that if indeed we build a wall, guess what? You're going to have to pay for it, and that is the taxpayers. And yet an individual that has worked with the IRS actually says by actually making a few changes in the tax code, Mexico really would pay for the wall. So he's at least got one idea, and that's been one of those questions that's been raised since the campaign started. So I'd love to get your comments on that. So we're going to have a chance to hear from him tomorrow. He's got an interesting theory. We're going to put some of that material on the website you can read ahead of time and then give you a chance to hear from him. And then, of course, if you want to ask some questions, it's interesting because that may be the way Donald Trump is thinking about having Mexico pay for the wall. I just simply don't know. So that is one of those issues that we would put there. So there again is an individual. By the way, I noticed the inauguration day is Obama plans to take a final ride on Air Force One. Okay, so that would be the last day. He's not going to take it to go anywhere because he's going to stay in Washington, D.C. But nevertheless, it certainly could be one of the last times in which he is on Air Force One. So we'll see how that plays out. But let me get to one of the other issues I wanted to put on the table. And as we get closer to the inauguration, this may be some concern. Michael Snyder talks about the fact that the radical leftists are planning to make, he says, January 20th the most chaotic inauguration day in American history. Their stated goal is to disrupt the inauguration festivities as much as possible, and they're planning a wide range of actions to achieve that stated goal. Michael Snyder goes on to say some of the more moderate groups are using terms like civil resistance and civil disobedience, but others, and these would be like the anarchists, are openly talking about blockades, jumping barricades, throwing projectiles, and citywide paralysis. Now, if you saw even just a clip or two today of the hearings for Jeff Sessions, you recognize that there were people even in a place where there's a fair amount of decorum trying to disrupt it. So it's not too hard to imagine that this might take place. Mike Snyder says that my hope is that all these efforts will turn out to be a big flop, but it is important to understand that these groups are well-funded, highly organized, and extremely motivated. The election of Donald Trump has been perhaps the single most galvanizing movement for the radical left in modern American history, and they're working very hard to turn January 20th into a major political statement. In fact, one activist group just took out a full-page ad in the New York Times. And again, we can look at some of that there, but let me go on to point out that the ad pointed people to refusefascism.org and asserted that Trump must be stopped whether he was legitimately elected or not. So you get some of these really strong kind of statements being made right now. So Michael Snyder took the time to go to this website. I don't recommend that you do, but if you do, you'll see that at refusefascism.org, you'll discover that the protests that they are organizing in Washington, D.C. will actually begin on January 14th. They say that they want to stop the Trump-Pence regime before it starts, and they hope to have protests going every day and every night without interruption through at least January 20th. Another group that plans to kick off things on January 14th is Disrupt J20. Of course, this is short for Disrupt January 20th. If you go to their website, you find that there's a long slate of events that have already been scheduled. And according to one of the people that is a spokesperson for Disrupt, one of the goals of the group is to block major transportation routes into and throughout our nation's capital. And he's not shy about the fact that they literally want to shut down the inauguration. So those are just a couple of comments. But let me also continue taking some phone calls here. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to the state of Georgia. Jane, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Yes, hi, how are you? And I thank you for taking my call. I just had a brief statement to make. I know everyone calls it a protest, but they're actually, starting violence and interruptions. And when our Constitution talks about a peaceful assembly, it doesn't talk about what they're planning on doing. So does that still hold merit?
I think so. And I've said this before. I guess I might as well say it on air. I've said it off air that, if you saw a sign that said kill Obama, I mean, we would have the Secret Service investigate that immediately. I am afraid you're going to see some signs that say kill Trump, and nobody's going to move, say, well, that's just protest. It's just words. I mean, it's just amazing what seems to be sort of a double standard. You can have a peaceful pro-life protest, and it's controversial in the Washington area, and you can have one that borders on violence, and, well, that's just free speech. And it seems to me that there is going to be a real need for those people in law enforcement to make sure that they rein in what could develop into quite a protest, reminiscent for those of us a little bit older of some of the protests we used to see in the 1960s and early 1970s over the Vietnam War and over first against Lyndon Johnson and later even Richard Nixon. So I don't know. I think we're headed for something that could be a little bit more violent, and I think a peaceful protest, peaceful assembly. You have the right under the First Amendment to peacefully assemble and to speak your words and to explain your position. But when you start jumping barricades, when you start throwing rocks, things are obviously out of hand. So that's a really important issue that you brought up, and I appreciate, Jane, you reminding us of what is the limit in terms of our First Amendment rights. So thanks for calling today.
Oh, you're so welcome. We have to get out of the PC thinking.
We certainly do. Jane, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Let's take one more phone call real quickly. Evan, I think I only got about 2 minutes, so what would you like to add to our conversation today?
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. The thing I would like to add, I have worked all my life, paid into Social Security. My employer matched what was the percentage that I paid, and it was mandated. And now we come out and we don't get Social Security raises on a regular basis, and this year we got one. It was 0.3%.
Which is a joke. And part of it is because they've completely changed what are called the COLAs, the cost of living index, which then makes it look like we don't have inflation when we do, and it also cheats those of you that are on Social Security. And I think that's one of the biggest crimes against the elderly. And it's just amazing to me that ARP and all sorts of senior groups don't fight this tooth and nail. So you've got a good point. Since I'm at the end of the program, could maybe even call back tomorrow. We can talk a little bit more about it, but I'm up against one of those mandatory breaks because the program's about ready to end. But Evan, I think you've pointed out another issue that needs to be addressed, and I appreciate you taking the time to call us today here on Point of View.
I appreciate you taking my call, and I appreciate your interest.
We will come back to that issue, and it is one that deserves a little more discussion. And when I look at the clock and I only have about a minute left, then obviously I can't get into it in some detail, but we will cover that another day. And whether Evan brings it up or one of the other callers bring it up, we'll get into that and explain a little bit more about why that is a really important issue. If you're interested, by the way, I have written some commentaries on that. You can obviously go to our website, pointofview.net, and as you go to the Viewpoints section, my Viewpoints commentaries are there. The one today is on how President Obama used the Monuments Act to actually lock up a fairly significant amount of land, 1.35 million acres in Utah, another 300,000 acres in Nevada. But if you do the search engine, you'll find as you type in Social Security some of the things I have written on that issue before. So we will simply have to leave it there. Go to the website. You can find out all sorts of great material. You can certainly find out about our Alaska cruise. And tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about how to pay for the wall. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Shamila for the help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
When listeners call in, we never know what they're going to say, and sometimes they shock us, like Jacob did.
We as Christians, we should learn to support ministries like yours that is reaching out and shining light into darkness. This is why Satan has such a great grip on America and the world, is because the world support their own. They will spend billions of dollars to make sure they are heard. The Lord is working a great work through Point of View.
We are thankful for listeners like Jacob and you who become part of our family, a real part, by sacrificing to support the work of Point of View. Take Jacob's words to heart and support us today. Enable us to continue shining God's light into the darkness. We honestly cannot do it without you. Visit pointofview.net. Look for the Donate Now button. or call 800-347-5151 or send a gift to Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I'm constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.